So I will be completely honest with you here. I have no idea why I bought this. Star Wars Battlefront II, the old one I should clarify, was a game that I adored on the original Xbox, and after playing it recently, it's a game that definitely holds up. And you can get the PC version off GOG and Steam if you fancy some functional multiplayer functionality and stuff. So with that in mind, why bother with this PlayStation 2 iteration when I had the other two that served me so well? Probably because it was cheap, and I was curious. Even though the last time I played a PlayStation 2 version of a game I already had on the Xbox, it was with somewhat less favorable results. Now, the good news is that Star Wars Battlefront 2 on the PlayStation 2 gives you the same old Star Wars Battlefront 2 fun you'd get on the Xbox, with the only difference being that the load times on the PS2 version are considerable and annoying, and sometimes the action tends to chug a bit when too much is going on at once, but for the most part, it's a pretty solid conversion, for the most part, or port, or whatever you want to call it. Now, we did the Xbox version a scant while ago, so I won't go into full detail here. Hold on. What's that? What's wrong? Okay. Sorry, folks. Gotta go. I gotta go walk the dog, but here's some recycled audio that pretty much covers the basics, and we'll get back to it after. So, sorry, folks. I gotta walk the dog. Star Wars Battlefront 2 is the sequel to what the box calls the best-selling Star Wars game ever made, or something to that extent. Considering Battlefront was a solidly made game that's fun to play, it's easy to understand why. Battlefront 2 is essentially more of the same, but with lots more added to the overall package, such as a proper story mode, playable heroes, and perhaps the most groundbreaking feature of all, space battles. That alone makes this game far superior to its predecessor, but I'm jumping ahead here. So generally speaking, if you've played the first Star Wars Battlefront, the old one, you know what to expect here. You control a random grunt for either of the four major powers, shoot down other grunts, and win the battle by capturing all the command posts in a map, or depleting enemy forces of their reinforcements. To make things more interesting, there's also a capture the flag variant, where you capture a flag and dump it into a thing in order to score points, as well as modes that let you hunt indigenous species depending on the planet. In terms of the general gameplay, Battlefront 2 hasn't really changed all that much from what came before, but that doesn't mean there isn't new stuff to play with. In the original Battlefront, all four sides had the same set of grunts, with one unique grunt for each faction. The Republic Jet Trooper or the Imperial Dark Trooper, for instance. Battlefront 2 expands on that by giving factions two unique grunts, which gives you more reason to experiment with the different factions. Even spacecraft between groups have some minor differences, which is something to make the four powers distinct from each other. These specialty units are locked away at first, made available after earning a number of points in the battlefield. Also, to rectify a glaring flaw or omission depending on your point of view in the original game, after scoring a number of points, you could play as a hero character for your faction, which varies depending on the map that you're playing. The hero character, whether it be a Jedi or enhanced grunt with special weapons, can keep his or her health up by killing other grunts and getting stuff done. But try and get stuff done as quickly as possible, because heroes are only around for a limited time, and once they're gone, you'll have to re-earn them once again. Fortunately, if you're a really good player, it's not that difficult to do. And then there's the crown jewel of Star Wars Battlefront 2, the space battles, where you fly a fighter in an attempt to destroy the enemy fleet, which comprises a mothership, two smaller frigates, and a bunch of fighters. There's a number of ways to approach this. Either pick a fighter and tackle the space fleet head-on while nubbing away at key systems bit by bit on the mothership, or you fly a transport to the other ship and attempt to destroy its systems from the inside out, all the while fending off against defensive turrets and other troops. Alternatively, you could stay on your own capital ship and man a turret of some kind to defend home territory, or you could dogfight your way through with a transport craft like a crazy person, which is always fun. Much like before, Battlefront 2 has three main modes. Well, four if you count the tutorial mission that teaches you how to play the game. There's the main story campaign, Rise of the Empire, where you control a squad of clone troopers through a variety of unique scenarios. There's instant action, which lets you get in on the action and stuff, customizable rules and things of that nature. And of course, there's Galactic Conquest, which has been overhauled from the previous game to be something akin to a mini strategy game type thing, where you control various starships and try to conquer all the systems on the map. Victories will earn you credits that will allow you to buy additional troop types, as well as extra bonuses such as increased garrisons, enhanced troops, and other bits and bobs. It's certainly a much more involved campaign than what came before in the previous game. Relatively speaking, Battlefront 2 plays similarly to its predecessor, which was already a fine enough game on its own merits, so the core aspects of gameplay are pretty solid. For the most part, if you've played the first Battlefront and you jump into this one, it's pretty similar in terms of the controls, the feels, some of the physics, and the whatnots. About half the maps are recycled from the previous game anyway, so that's familiar territory for the veterans. The controls are pretty much the same as before. Once you get the hang of it and learn all the gimmicks, or browse through the tutorial, it works fluidly and responsively enough. However, it's the various enhancements and additions that make Battlefront 2 a somewhat better game than what came before. Whether it's the little things such as the inclusion of varied special troops, the ability to play as the heroes, the minor differences in armaments in terms of starfighters between groups, the addition of space battles, a new dedicated story mode, or campaign as the cool kids call it. The overhaul of the Galactic Conquest mode, Battlefront 2 feels the same as before, but with a much bigger toy box with more toys to play with. That's almost always nice. The minor differences between eras and units makes it worthwhile to experiment with the various groups instead of just sticking with the one. Once more, you get to pick the era you choose from, which means you're always going to have clones versus droids and rebels versus stormtroopers, and no way to mix the two. Although there is a campaign in the Rise of the Empire mode that pits stormtroopers against clone troopers, and, well, enough said. The space battles are probably my favorite of the bunch, and perhaps a necessary addition to the package, because I never felt comfortable flying an X-Wing over land in the first Battlefront game because it felt awkward, especially when you could have added in more terrain-appropriate vehicles into the mix. So giving this game the space setting makes sense. You're able to expand on it somewhat with more space to maneuver your ships, and to have some sweet dogfights, and being able to take on a capital ship. These space battles are never going to reach the complexity and intricacies of an X-Wing or TIE Fighter space simulator from the days of DOS, but they're competently done and fun for a lark. Okay, I'm back. So dog's in the bed. Had quite a bit of a walk there. Yeah, I haven't seen that much shit since Attack of the Clones, so there you go. Okay, where was I? Oh yeah, alright. So, visually speaking, Star Wars Battlefront 2, fine looking game for its day, and honestly, it's almost on par in terms of graphical quality with the Xbox version, which shouldn't be much of an issue for consoles of this generation. They tend to look pretty much the same way for the most part. Maps look pretty good, even the ones that have been recycled from the previous game. There's some choppiness in the frame rate when a lot of stuff is going on, probably more so in this PlayStation 2 version than the Xbox version, and also, as I've alluded to, the load times are unfortunately an unavoidable irritant, but for the most part, the game runs smoothly enough. The space sequences look pretty good, particularly in terms of the various ships, how they look, and the stellar settings of sort. Nothing but good things to say about the graphics. Star Wars Battlefront 2 also sounds like Star Wars. That is to say, you got select pieces from the John Williams composed scores of the first 6 Star Wars movies, circa 2005. A lot of familiar sound effects being used. They sound good. A lot of voice chatter returns from the previous game with more stuff to say. No complaints in that regard, it sounds fine. I've said it before and I'll say it again, Star Wars Battlefront 2 is a fantastic little game, whether it be on the Xbox, the PC, which is the most widely available version these days, or even this PlayStation 2 version, despite some minor warts here and there. It might not feature content from the more recent movies, which may or may not be a huge loss from a certain point of view, but you get a bunch of varied battlefields, some distinct units among the 4 factions, loads of playable heroes, some solid space combat stages, and some of the finest gameplay I've come across. Fun game with a sizable toy box to play with, definitely one worth checking out if you haven't already.